start over here. I should see a green light there. I do. And then I can hit resume the show. Ladies and gentlemen, they created this illusion of consensus by sticking to a limited spectrum of debate. That's right, this little team of meddlers, team worst case scenario, I like to call them. Here's a family photo from January 2024 where they are in front of the U.S. Senate. This is their one and only chance in history to collect this much data, this many genomes and the medical data to go along with it, this much behavior, this much data for their AI. They imagine if they collect enough of it and then put it into the big computer and store it and shuffle it around that they're going to be able to figure something out. That's why they want your kids wearing stuff because, again, ladies and gentlemen, we are being manipulated on a multi-generational time scale, so it's not just about right now and selling a widget. It's also about your grandkids. Don't forget, it's about your grandkids. It may even be that this guy was never a good guy and that everything that he said has to be taken with a grain of salt because he was always a bad guy, always telling you only what they wanted you to hear. And a spectacular commitment to lies is all that is required from the computer-generated graphics that bamboozled us in 2020 to the wonderful people on podcasts that giggle and agree with one another now. They still need us to teach this mythology to our kids, so there's still time to turn it around. We can still teach our kids to use their own common sense and to understand their responsibilities to their creator, that they understand their responsibilities to what they've been given, the opportunity they've been given on this planet. I have the feeling that my desk is rolling around here. I hope that's not the case, but it feels like it may have rolled out of position. And in that case, who knows what we'll look like here in a minute. It is a history that people are going to need to reckon with. It's a history, not only this, history that everybody's willing to talk about on TV, but also that painful history, how long these people have been pretending to be fighting for something. I don't know exactly what. I guess it's against vaccines because they call themselves anti-vaxxers, but they haven't achieved much anti-vax action. It's just a lot of shameless money taking and murder. And I don't use that picture with me and Polly because I was just hoping for a very long time. But I mean, with a track record of in 2010 being on 90 billboards to sway votes about autism. And not advocating to protect kids from the potential cause of it. It's really remarkable. It's all about the history, ladies and gentlemen. If you know who Soph is and you know who her mom is and you know what Soph was up to before the pandemic and the year before the pandemic, you know that she was on Alex Jones, and then you know that her mom was involved in this by being on stage with Robert Malone and Meryl Nass in the January of 2023 talking about how the DOD did it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just gross. I don't know how to explain it any other way than people like Sasha Latipova and her daughter are not the Americans that I grew up with. It's probably why Sasha Latipova still has an accent, because she's really not an American. She's masquerading as an American, and in reality, she is a meddler and probably a part of the controlled demolition that this traitor, Robert Malone, is also intricately involved in, that Brett Weinstein is intimately involved in. Brett Weinstein could have told you in 2021 that this was a transfection because I screamed it at him and begged it to him to tell him in Signal. Him and some other people that I also include in this list of traitors because they knew the right word in 2021. I taught them what it meant. I taught them the biological consequences of it. And people like Kevin McKernan and his anonymous accounts on Twitter have created the illusion that this doesn't matter, but it does. It does, because for 2.5 years, everybody was calling them investigational vaccines, including someone as sophisticated as Kevin McKernan or as sophisticated as Brian Hooker. And
Ralph
that's
Dark's
the
guy
kind
who
of
arguably taught with.
That's the kind of spectacular commitment to lies that is required, and we have gotten unwavering commitment to this lie from Brian Hooker and Mary Holland and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Kevin McKernan and Robert Malone and Meryl Nass, all of these people are spectacularly committed to a lie where people got sick and it correlated with molecular tests. Here's Ryan Cole telling you that he too is spectacularly committed to the lies that there's a sickness that correlated with tests.
Physician, Mayo Clinic trained, anatomic clinical pathology, subspecialty fellowship in dermatopathology. I do molecular biology. I've done over 150,000 COVID tests in my laboratory.
This is a problem, ladies and gentlemen, because there is a consistent theme between these people. From 2020 onward, Kevin McKernan was whining about the FDA being in the way of testing. And all the way until 2024, when Mary Holland, who's been at it for decades already, meets him outside of the Senate where he tells them about the DNA contamination in the shot. A narrative that I was already able to call as coming in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, they only were able to come for your kids because we submitted. That's how it happened. And we have one chance to take it back. We have one chance, but the way to take it back is to take it back with our kids. It can't be our kids alone. It's us and our kids. We are under a multi-generational assault on all fronts, including the military social control programs that we call social media. And if we don't work now together with our kids to take back the power from these charlatans, we will never get it back and we will be enslaved for generations. This time could be different because there are people who can see them. There are people who have been tracking down the mentors of these people and tracking down the lineage of ideas that has propelled us to this place. I've got a great deal of hope, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you can see that in my Biology 101 lectures that I've given over the last couple days. They're kind of impromptu, but they are working out very well, I think, because biology is the truth. So it's kind of easy once you understand it from a gut perspective. Ooh, that was a great pun. Wow, I didn't even think that was going to come out. Look, there's no way that these people can avoid us anymore. The future is us everywhere. The future is this truth everywhere. The future is this new Biology 101 everywhere. That's the reality. Ladies and gentlemen, intramuscular injection is dumb. Transfection in healthy people is a crime. And RNA cannot pandemic. You can assure yourself that there is more than enough science to edify these ideas because the U.S. vaccine schedule is a criminal enterprise. In fact, all of the vaccine schedules around the world are essentially a criminal enterprise, and these people have known it for a very long time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. It is 5:31. Gigaohm Biological is the show with the longest intro that isn't just a movie. I don't know why I do that. It kind of gets me warmed up. It makes sure everything is working. It gets all my levels right. It gets things in my ear, gets me grooving, loosens me up a little bit. I don't know. It's kind of like a runway. It's kind of a ritual I almost have to go to. It's the 5th of April, 2025, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to fade this out a little bit. I got a lot to say. It is still a message of hope. It's not for everyone, but it is for anyone. I'm very, 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 very excited about it because Biology 101 is just falling together. Can I just share some stuff? I mean, you know, it is absolutely essential that everybody understand that right now there exists a treasure trove of knowledge on eBay that is sometimes available by the box. I've found a couple booksellers that sell books at $5 each, and they will ship them in big boxes together. And I have just been winning. I mean, winning. Where did I put the big bag? I must have moved it out of here now. What did I do? I mean, I got microbiology books back here. In case you were unaware, there used to be a course in university called microbiology. There's an encyclopedia of microbiology that is edited by Joshua Lederberg, and there's just so much information out there. Where did I put that book? I have this really wonderful. I just got back from the basketball court not too long ago. Oh, there's a huge pile over there, but that's not what I want to do. Sorry, so I'm not going to go over there now and get those. I'm already wired in. But I've got lots of books about viruses as they were found. Viruses, really contemporary books. And I'm really excited about the library that I'm building because it makes it very fun to come down here and do homework. And homework right now for me just consists of opening a book, taking notes, and trying to understand how these, foundational ideas have changed. It really feels like a shell game. That for a long time, when Joshua was still alive, everybody really understood that this was all bacterial genetics, and bacterial tools were being used in mammalian examples, but and eukaryotic examples, but they weren't how do I say it? They weren't under any preconceived notions that all of these mechanisms would have their very accessible homologue in our own biology. And so it's really remarkable how quickly this all fell together once the main puzzle pieces that I think are essentially there because of Joshua Lederberg, once those puzzle pieces fell in place, I've already had some very, very talented and insightful biology teachers in my life. And so I didn't come to this battle unequipped. I came with some previous, extra weaponry. And that served me well. And it also was a great handicap as a would-be tenure track professor wannabe. And since this whole shakeup has happened with Corona, it's just been an invaluable kind of big picture understanding of biology that goes all the way back to me as a kid and my grandmother and I watching birds together. So this is for all the marbles, ladies and gentlemen. It is for the grandchildren of Earth. If you want to know what all the marbles are, it's for the grandchildren of Earth. And the people that we're fighting against, the forces we're fighting against, are forces which act on, plan on, and think on multi-generational time horizons. And those time horizons make it harder for us, trapped on social media in very, very tiny, short time horizons, to see the effect of their plans and to see evidence of their plans. But the pandemic, I hope, has been something that's allowed a lot of people to step back and see a 5-year time span. And then even now, I'm hoping that I can help you see like a 15-year time span where so many people had ideas that didn't change, had a trajectory of ideas that didn't progress logically fast enough for them to claim to be only where they are after the experience of the pandemic. And I believe that careful inspection of many of these people reveals them as to what they are as essentially actors put in place, given a role, following a script, not asking any questions, and even if they ask questions, they don't do it on camera. It's really very simple. Because when it comes to all the marbles, there wasn't really a lot necessary. And I hope that has become more and more clear as we've moved forward. I think this one. The murder and lies that I'm depicting here, comes my mouse. The murder and lies here don't require that much. It doesn't require thousands and thousands and thousands of people to be put on ventilators and against their will, and thousands of people to be put on remdesivir. And the reason why it doesn't require that is because there was already a rise in all-cause mortality. We already had an abundance of people that we had been doing very much all we could to keep them alive. And so even just the vigorous treatment of old people in distress could be tweaked enough to create peaks that would otherwise not be there. And so with careful application of certain things that included but are not limited to the not using antibiotics for pneumonia, often causing pneumonia by giving pure oxygen when it wasn't necessary, and using PCR as a diagnostic tool to justify treating someone as if they had a respiratory disease and therefore maybe causing pneumonia with a mask, with ventilator, with, these kinds of things. And so I keep going back to pneumonia because behind me, you can see that we have not had any problem with pneumonia. This graph goes back to 2014 down here. And we haven't had any problem with pneumonia until 2020 when we lost control of it until exactly the end of 2021, and then we got control of it again. And that doesn't really make sense unless you think of it primarily as murder and lies. And so the question becomes murder and lies for what? And I think I've done my best to explain that the dynamics of world population being what they are in that McKinsey report, being shaped more like an obelisk instead of like a pyramid, we are looking at a population collapse. Right now we have 10 billion people, but we don't have the kids coming up in the Western world to replace those people. The boomer generation is bigger than the generations behind it, and every generation behind those are getting smaller. And people like my brother and sister-in-law think it's their duty not to have children because, again, this message has been sent. And so I have been arguing that depopulation is a very small aspect of this because depopulation was already taken care of. And you can hear it in the video that I played at the beginning of this stream. They are now preparing for a collapse of the college-age demographic, which will start this year and continue into the foreseeable future. We have way too many colleges for the number of kids we have coming in America. That's also why all the elementary schools that you see in your local communities are unnecessary in 10 years or 20 years. Many of them will be redundant. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of or all of your school boards are already planning well ahead of that. And the thing to understand is that people like the Human Genome Project and the NIH and the US military and all the militaries around the world and all of the pharmaceutical companies around the world that make money off of sick people and all of the multinational corporations that make billions of dollars off of millions of people understand that their consumer demographic is changing in the future and are planning ahead for it. It would be absurd to think that they wouldn't know that any actuary worth their salt wouldn't already been projecting this in the 80s, in the 90s. And so they know that they have this one chance to collect the grandchildren of Earth, to convince the parents of Earth that the grandchildren of Earth and their data are part of a greater mission, a bigger thing, because the species is multi-generational. And so these rich people actually want to take control of the evolution of the species by collecting all the data that they can and feeding it to their God, artificial intelligence. Now, we can have a whole nother show about how artificial intelligence is an absolute myth, and it is, but it's nonetheless a myth that is very compelling. And if you combine that myth with the idea that maybe in the future that won't be a myth, and you combine that with the reality that this is the last time they're going to be able to collect 10 billion grandchildren before that number is going to collapse, then they better collect all of this data now because there will never be a chance to collect this many humans again. It's a real mathematical certainty that at some point there will never be this many humans on the planet again unless we allow or somehow the prosperity of the human race again starts to blossom like it did, I guess, after World War II. And so murder and lies for what? Well, for what? They need to start the Human Genome Project in earnest. They needed to collect data. and they needed to do a test run, and they will probably do another test run, because remember, they don't even know what all the data is yet. The whole idea of sequencing a human genome is still an illusion. They don't, when 23andMe sends you back the sequence, they don't give you a list of 4 billion bases, honey. And so this is an illusion. And so they needed to do a test run. And what is the test run they did? Well, they created a remnant stream, a leftover medical waste stream, which could provide a endless source of genomic data. And that is PCR testing, swabs, saliva samples, all this stuff. And this is going on regularly in all our corporate hospitals now. And that remnant stream has been in existence unstoppable since 2020. And all of those samples, at least for a long time, were going through DITRA and collected through DITRA. And so in some ways, you could see that harvesting was one and done. I don't know. But then they have all that data. Then they need to sequence it. Then they need to store it on a computer. And that would be like a test run, right? That would be like a test database. So how many could they get? How well did it go? What was the error rate? What was the coverage rate? All these questions needed to be answered and are being answered, I assure you. And that's the same reason why all these people are in the fake anti-vaccine movement, including Kevin McKernan, the former research and development director for the Human Genome Project. That's why. Because it's one big malevolent show. And that's why these people were put in place. That's why Claire Craig is a pathologist who worked on the 100,000 Genomes Project before the pandemic. That's not accident. Darn it, it's not accident. My ear itches. Because I didn't clean this thing well enough. Sorry about that. That's details you don't need to hear.
While Bobby is focused on ending the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, I am going to assemble the best technologists and scientists in the world, and we will use the latest in AI and computation to examine the health records databases of our nation and those other nations who are also on a quest to solve chronic disease.
It's an interesting thing that she says on the campaign trail that they're going to use AI and all of the data to solve chronic disease, because later today we're going to watch a little podcast with that Huberman guy who claims to be a neuroscientist as well, like a me. But he's going to say exactly the same thing like a clown reading a script. It's really remarkable, ladies and gentlemen, how easy it is to see it if you just allow yourself to look.
Because only together can we seize the moment to defeat cancer.
This is in 2016. We watched this video a couple weeks ago where they talk all about getting the data. It's all about the data. And it's easy to imagine that Big Pharma is involved because they are multinational. It's harder to imagine that social media is involved, but the Human Genome Project is a military project. It is a national security level 1 Department of Energy, just like the nukes are. And so this is no joke. And they put the military on the internet, on podcasts, performing for us because this is that important. And remarkably, it is a recycling of a political stunt that I think that actually maybe was discovered by Steve Bannon and used to try and position Robert F. Kennedy Jr. perhaps as vice president. And him getting to HHS secretary is maybe like a, slightly outside of the bullseye dart. But he's there. And this guy and that guy and this guy down here, they all really wanted him to be vice president. And it should be absolutely remarkable to you that these people, a Goldman Sachs, intellectual property, Navy, Human Genome Project, intellectual property, fake biologist, intellectual property father, worked with intellectual property father and Department of Justice father on the FDA. And this guy's complaining about the FDA in 2020. They're in the way. And now the FDA is all but destroyed. Nobody and nothing is in this narrative by chance. I've really come to understand that. The Human Genome Project is behind all of this, or at least one of the main motivating factors behind all of this, I assure you. That is the only explanation for these people to be where they are. Robert Malone and the domain server and the anthrax vaccine with Meryl Nass and this person who worked on AIDS. This person, the 100,000 Genomes Project, a college dropout turned research and development director for the Human Genome Project. Brothers work on cancer. Dad worked on microarrays. This guy who worked for Solvay with Robert Malone. That lady over there is at MIT talking about glyphosate ineffectively for years. You gotta be joking. Everybody has a timeline. My timeline, I think, reveals somebody trying really hard to figure it out. And I go from thinking it's a lab leak being covered up to trying to argue the biology doesn't support that idea and being meddled with consistently for 5 years. And I have a consistent track record that includes an unfortunate acknowledgement in this book, which is super bizarre now that he is Health and Human Services Secretary. It's super bizarre that the guy who is the scientific director of Children's Health Defense, who essentially fired me at the end of 2023, in 2013, he had it all right. In 2013, he said, I don't say autism, I say vaccine neurological injury. I question the entire idea of vaccines, and it's not just the MMR, it's many shots. That's 2013 Brian Hooker, and 2020 Brian Hooker is all about asymptomatic spread and doesn't know who Brandy Vaughn is. It is remarkable, ladies and gentlemen. It is remarkable where we are right now. Because somebody like Polly Tommy, who never in 2010 was even fighting to end any shots or become aware of how autism is caused, she was actually campaigning and had billboards where she was in a bra and got to talk to the prime minister and sway 6 million votes in order to get autistic kids to be treated better in school. Not to save anybody from making more autistic kids, not to save any future kids from injury, but to get autistic kids better jobs. I shit you not. So it's pretty remarkable that the only person or organization that I know of that was able to say that vaccines do more harm than good is Brandy Vaughn's Learn the Risk. Children's Health Defense never says that. They don't make banners that say that. They don't make billboards that say that. They make banners that say rise and resist, people over profits, truth over lies, courage over fear. And so the courage that Brandy Vaughn had to do that with her own money in 2016 without having a vaccine-injured kid, but feeling guilty about having a vaccine-free child. But we have to defer to Brian Hooker because his kid's injured. We have to defer to Polly because her kid's injured. We have to defer to Mary Holland because her kid's injured. I know Polly and Mary's kids are being taken very well care of. I don't know about Brian's kid because I think they use Brian's job and the pain and suffering that he goes through as the father of an adult autistic kid against him to control him, to keep him where he is. Because he was saying it right in 2013. And now he can't say it right anymore. Brandy Vaughn could make billboards. They made 2 movies with Brandy Vaughn. They took pictures with her, including James Lyons Weiler, the guy that Children's Health Defense and Brian Hooker and Mary Holland put on stage at every one of their frickin' shows, every one of their conferences. He's been there on stage, pushing his own IPAC crap. And same with Dell. And none of them can say it. None of them say the vaccine schedule is criminal. None of them say that intramuscular injection is dumb. They keep asking it might be adjuvants. Maybe it's the EMF. Hell, they just said that fluoride could do it. So Brandy Vaughn died on the 7th of December 2020, and then after that, the Union of the Unwanted.
Oh my gosh, it was so great, so great. So my first stop after I finished seeing my patients today was to
So 2 weeks after Brandy died, they're all having a laugh because it's, you know, pandemic, and they're going to Costco to buy everything out because, you know, that's how I roll. I bought everything. I bought like 6 chickens. And of course, what's disturbing about that little video is that there's Brian Hooker and his friend, there's some other doctor who just are on a script, and they're calling back and forth to each other. Hey, Brian, what do you know about B cells? Wink, wink. Hey, Dr. Kendra, what do you know about antibodies? Wink, wink. And the whole list that comes out of them at 2020, 2 weeks after Brandy was killed, his safety studies are too short on these vaccines. These vaccines during illness can cause, you know, crazy stuff. His 5G warfare, what is that? That must be 5G. Neutralizing antibodies, they fade, so they're not really, they're not really immunity. And asymptomatic carrier, it can be asymptomatic for like 5 days, so it's totally crazy. And these vaccines, do they target T cells, Brian? Yeah, I don't really know. You know, it's important to talk about T cells, but right now they're talking about neutralizing antibodies, so that's what I'm going to say. And nothing at all about the PCR, nothing at all about the word transfection. And here we have Brian Hooker with 16 years transforming and transfecting plants. And he said that in 2013. You know, when he said that he doesn't use the word autism, he says neurologically injured kids. So somewhere between 2013 and 2020, Brian Hooker got on board. Maybe because he was told that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be president, and so if you want to be part of that, you know, now's your chance. You're going to have to hold your breath for a minute. You're going to have to, you know, help us with this narrative. Help us with this stuff, but in the end, you'll get your book, which came out in 2023. Vax, no vax. Still doesn't say it, but, you know, at least he's got a book. Oh, it's brutal, ladies and gentlemen, because these happy little accidents didn't start in 2020 and they didn't end yet. They've been going on for decades, and they're getting more and more frequent as they put more and more players on the field. And during the coronavirus pandemic, they had a whole team of people out there that I'm calling team worst case scenario. They were out there specifically to make sure that PCR would never be questioned as a diagnostic. Only debated about the details. That's why Kevin McKernan was out in front of that in 2020. That's why he helped with Claire Craig to gather all these cats to write the Corman-Jorston report. Get them all on board, all on message. The PCR works. PCR is a great way to find a coronavirus. It's just that the way the WHO did it and Jorston did it, it wasn't fair because their peer review was too fast and their primers make dimers. So PCR is now a widely used medical diagnostic standard, and the FDA of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. does not give a shit. Marty McCarty does not care. And this is by design. This is one of the main reasons they put all these people where they are. And why they are there now, because they're going to go along with this. You think Jay Bhattacharya learned anything from me in those 3 years that would lead him to, you know, recommend to his director that, hey, or to his secretary that, you know, maybe we should look at put the FDA on this, get Marty on this. Maybe we should look at these as individual medical devices? Of course they're not going to do that. The vaccine schedule has been successfully insulated from any real scrutiny. And I assure you, within a decade, they will have almost exclusively turned it into an mRNA schedule if they have anything to say about it at all. And I called that already a couple years ago, but it's clearly going to happen. And it's going to happen because of this, because the public scrutiny into the nature of intramuscular injection has been effectively nullified by these clowns and their clown show. asking dumb questions. And it will continue to expand both younger and older, to pregnant women and to old people, until personalized transfection will become the gold standard, because that's how they're going to purify it. They can't make it in big batches because that makes for a lot of impurities they can't separate, and they already knew that. But the next generation of these will be printed. They will essentially make them, synthesize them, and that will make them very pure. And that will be also their way of making it to order. And then there's no need for an FDA anyway, because it's not a product that you're going to put in a bottle with a label. You're just going to put it in a bottle and put a name on it, like JJCouey. And that will be the vaccine schedule going forward. There was no epidemiological evidence of spread, ladies and gentlemen. Instead, there was an anticipated rise in expected deaths. And they sculpted that using murder and lies. And that's how they got this myth to look like the myth that they wanted it to look like. But this anticipated rise in all-cause mortality is visible in any honest population pyramid. Here you see the population pyramid, the change in population here, and the aging population getting older and older, and you can see the expanding population up here past retirement. That is an economic disaster if not properly managed. And the coming collapse in the population is also a very bad disaster. It doesn't look like it here, but in fact it is much worse than that, and especially in many Western nations in Europe.
Over the next decade, there will be fewer 18-year-olds available to fill the nation's universities. An analysis of census data projects that by 2039, the pool will drop by 15% every year thereafter. In tonight's interview, Jeff Stroll, director of Georgetown's Center on Education and the Workforce, explains what it means for America's future. Jeff, colleges and universities have been experiencing an enrollment drop-off that's known as the demographic cliff. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah, what we're having over time in the United States is declining population. We just hit the marker where our high school class is going to go down in absolute terms, which then affects the enrollments into colleges. Now, the demographic cliff spreads wider than that. I often think about that enrollment decline as a small stream into a big pond, because we've been having these demographic declines for some time, and they're just catching up with us now.
And how long have we been seeing this come, and are colleges prepared for the demographic cliff?
They're not as prepared as one might have thought they would be, because we've known.
Why would they be prepared? In other words, what they needed to do was take advantage of it, because it was more college kids than would ever exist again. Our generation was the most college kids that would ever exist. So if you were going to harvest all the tuition money that you could harvest through all the student loans you could get, you need to open every frickin' college you can possibly open and charge as much money as those kids would possibly spend. That's one way that you can imagine them sucking the life out of America in a controlled demolition over a generation. I feel very much responsible for that by having gone to one of these liberal arts college and taking out massive loans and spending Pell Grants. For what? To get the same thing I could have gotten at the University of Wisconsin for a fraction of the cost? But they were doing it on purpose because there was a once-in-a-generation chance. They're never going to have this many deans of medical schools again. The dean of the medical school at the University of Pittsburgh gets paid more than $2 million a year. I mean, they're never going to have that again. The head of neurobiology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine makes more than $500,000 a year in raw salary. They're not going to have the infrastructure to create those kinds of jobs ever again in academia. The whole illusion of academia is based on all these kids percolating up through the grad schools. It's all over. That's all done. And it's going to be done very quickly. It's a steep slope now. It's unsustainable. And just as cool as it would have been to be at the start of that, when anybody could have gotten a job at any university because everybody needed a professor because they had to get all these classrooms open before all these kids were ready to enroll, or otherwise they would have missed the chance to make the money. And now those chairs aren't going to be filled anymore, and so I'm sure we're going to have to subsidize or blah, 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 blah. You'll see. But the point is that they knew this was coming. They've known it was coming for decades. And the way that they managed it is through careful managing of the narrative, careful curation of the protocols, careful curation of the fear and frustration and doubt, and making sure that none of the most senior doctors would be there because they would be afraid to catch this disease, which primarily affected old people. Ladies and gentlemen, letting the opioid deaths go wild for a few years helped them tremendously. It's all sculpting using murder and lies. Lots of people don't like sometimes I emphasize one thing or another thing. I don't know how they killed the majority of people. I don't know exactly how many people needed to be killed to create whatever this was, but it wasn't that many, and there were lots of ways to do it. And so you have to imagine a team of performers with elaborate costumes and scripts, all on that same script provided by Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan, about a spike protein that could affect the mitochondria, a spike protein that could affect the heart, a spike protein that could cause amyloidosis or prion disease, a spike protein with furin cleavage sites and HIV inserts, and a staphylococcus enterotoxin B homology. This script was given to these performers, and they went and pretended that they were rushing to stop the train, and pulling hard on it was helping to stop it. Just like this guy's performing. Everybody from Kevin McCairn to the Baileys to Andrew Kaufman, to Meryl Nass, to Robert Malone, to Mike Eden, to Nick Hudson and Panda, to all of these people that were on the boat off of Turkey in 2022. All the people that have been in hot tub shots or shoe photographs together. Wittingly or unwittingly, they are participating in this train-stopping exercise where nobody needed to be rescued. And it's only because everybody is pretending to have to stop this train and pulling really hard on it that people stop and start helping them. Jessica Rose complaining about VAERS consistently for 5 years, learning nothing, even though for like 2.5 months she was just absolutely spellbound by me and my biology and just thought it was keeping her up at night, this clone idea. And then they reissued the script and she went right back on it because that's what they do. That's why she can surf on 3 continents and not have a job and have no real track record, even though she was apparently chasing tenure for quite some time. She never really had a job. She just did a postdoc and then another postdoc and another postdoc, and then at the start of the pandemic called all those postdocs post-secondary degrees. I mean, if I went around saying that I have a post-secondary degree in neuroscientific modeling and systems neuroscience and molecular neuropsychiatry and also biophysics, would that be cool? Or would you know that I was full of shit? But for some reason, nobody knows that this person is full of shit when she says that she's an immunologist and a computational biologist and a molecular biologist and an applied mathematician and something else, or that this guy is a bioethicist and also the inventor of mRNA and also a horse breeder and an emu breeder and a barn builder and a guy who consults for the Vatican. And this is supposedly somebody who's been to Africa and Rhodesia for Ebola and then was on stage with Stephen Hatfield in 2023, the Ebola guy. I mean, it's all just one big show. And if these people right here in the middle were all in on it and agreed to be all in on it, everybody else could be essentially bamboozled because they trust those people, because they hang out with them, because they've had drinks with them, because they met them at the hotel bar late night or had hotel breakfast with them in Romania or in Iceland. That's why they're doing it, and that's why it's now obvious. You can go to my website and download this. You got to go to the link called Stuff on the top, and you can download the McKinsey Global Institute report that shows you that these population pyramids are inverted. It shows you that that's got to be why Denny Rancor is involved, because Denny Rancor doesn't seem to know anything about population pyramids. An increase in all-cause mortality expected for a couple years, for a couple decades? No, I never heard of that. And so I think this is when I kind of all figured it out. When I saw all these guys on stage together in Romania, I couldn't really... Why Romania? Why the hell would you go to Romania and give a talk? Why not do this in Chicago? Or do a tour in America and Canada? What in the hell did they go to Romania for? How much money did they spend on the flights and the hotels to be over there with the Tate brothers? What was that all about? And what in the hell is Stephen Hatfill standing right next to my friend used to be Nick Hudson? I mean, that's just creepy. You know, Stephen Hatfill's the guy who said that Barney the dinosaur should have a mask on at the beginning of the pandemic to teach 2-year-olds what masks mean. And all those people except Steve Hatfill were in front of the Senate about a month later. It's just traitorous. So we are being governed by a group of meddlers that are creating this limited spectrum of debate like national security operators. And they are on social media, but they're also behind the scenes influencing lawmakers and lawyers and teachers and congressmen and congresswomen and business people. It's a very powerful weapon. If you send, Robert Malone and Ryan Cole and one other of these to some meeting, it's over. Their celebrity status takes over, their charm takes over, their well-rehearsed pitches take over, and their limited spectrum of debate is completely enchanting. And I think that's why some of those people at the top are even probably just enchanted. I mean, I don't think Wolfgang Wodock's a bad guy. I hope someday I can write a book with him. I mean, I don't think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can possibly be considered a good guy, but on the other hand, you got to have a little sympathy for a guy whose dad and uncle were murdered, because most likely ever since that happened, he's been the victim of an influence operation, a Truman Show. And there's no doubt in my mind he's a victim of it now. Just like I was. It's a Lollapalooza of liars. They suck you in. They tell you how great you are and how smart you are. And then they say, why don't you go along with us on just this one thing? The lab leak. Just don't say it so rough now. First, let's just make it about choice. Let's make it a big top tent of health freedom. We'll teach your immunology in a couple years. We'll tell them about Brandy Vaughn in a couple years. We'll tell them about ingestion versus injection in a couple years. Right now, let's make it about free speech and free choice, because that's what the lawyers say is the best way to fight. Those same lawyers, every time I talk to them about holding the government to strict scrutiny when they suspend fundamental rights, they're all kind of like, huh? What? What do you mean by that? What does that mean? What do those words mean? I don't get it. What's strict scrutiny? So I think you can find out what's going on with this picture right here, because his father hired his father, and those two fathers are essentially responsible for the FDA, plus a guy by the name of Senator Kefauver. And Senator Kefauver got killed like 3 weeks before or after his uncle. Senator Kefauver may have wanted the FDA, I think, that bill to be a lot stricter and sharper than it ended up being, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, that's just old history, right? Who cares? The point is that these people are involved, and it's not for nothing. It is absolutely essential to see that. This guy has lied about me and my family on the internet. prominently on podcasts and on Twitter. This is big time. And so the Lollapalooza of liars continues, and I just wanted to cover a couple things before I go. Ow. That was very loud. We're going to do an Iverson, then we're going to do a Shanahan, then we're going to do a Huberman. The bench is being emptied, and it's funny because these people are coming off the bench, and their script is one of the rungs of the hamster wheel from 2020. It is a joke. Quite frankly, it's absolutely a joke. Remember, just to recap what I've been ranting about for the last hour or so, these people have had, for example, Brian Hooker has had since 2023. Sorry, Brian Hooker has had since 2013, when he had 16 years experience as a transforming and transfecting plant biologist, doing genetically modified plants to create medicines. He's had that long, since 2013, to say that intramuscular injection is dumb, or that, you should compare the vaccine schedule in America to any other schedule in the world. And he could have called it transfection in 2020, and he just didn't.
Well, it might not be news to some, but doctors are facing censorship from the government, especially in states like California. Surprise, surprise. So what are they allowed to say? And more importantly, how does this impact your health?
So what are they allowed to say is exactly the issue that it has been and remains and always has been. Every time we talk about this, it's either mandates or medical freedom or freedom of speech. And this is bullshit. It's bullshit because vaccination is a crime. Vaccination is more equivalent to hitting kids in the head with a baseball bat than it is something that works sometimes and sometimes it hurts people. That's not what we're dealing with. That's what the narrative is. That's what all these witting and unwitting stooges keep saying for the last 15 or 20 years, that we have to fight mandates, that we have to have free choice, even though free choice about something that is poison, free choice about something that is murderous or damaging or injurious is not the right argument. Just like arguing that kids should have the choice of whether they get a sex change operation or not is ridiculous. Kids should not have the right or the choice to drive a car into a crowded building. It would be absurd to say that, well, everybody's got the right to choose who they want to kill, and then we'll deal with the consequences afterward, because, sometimes people choose the right. I know these are not perfect analogies, but you need to understand that if you're arguing for mandates, or you are arguing for freedom of speech or freedom of choice in 2025, you're making the same argument that Brian Hooker's been making for the last decade, that Mary Holland's been making for the last decade, that Andrew Wakefield and Polly Tommy have been making for the last 2 decades.
Joining us today is Dr. Azadeh Khattibi, a board-certified physician with a master's in public health and a master's in health and medical sciences. Dr. Khattibi is also a staunch advocate for medical freedom, having filed multiple lawsuits against California's government for violations of physicians' First Amendment rights. She's testified before Congress on issues like patient autonomy and the physician-patient relationship during the COVID pandemic. In addition to her medical work, Dr. Khattibi is an accomplished actor and filmmaker with experience on Academy Award eligible and shortlisted films. Currently, she's working on a documentary exploring free speech in medicine. Dr. Khattibi, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this time, Kim. I'm super excited and hope that whatever I say will serve your audience.
I'm sure it will. I have to tell you, to get ready for this interview, I watched you on Dr. Drew's show, and it was so funny to watch how you were like, Drew, Dr. Drew, I've watched you forever. I listened.
Okay, so going nuts about Dr. Drew, a fellow Rumble performer, having an actress on to talk about free speech and a flubbed response to a coronavirus pandemic in 2025, to talk about medical freedom to talk about doctors' First Amendment rights and to flatter about how handsome Dr. Drew is. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but Kim Iverson is not cutting any clips of Jonathan Couey for YouTube. None. She cuts clips for everybody else, but not for me. I don't know if she's cut clips for Tom Cowan yet, but Tom Cowan was on her show a few days after me. And there was no, conversation about, I just talked to some guy. They don't learn. Nobody who's podcasting is learning, like if somebody tells them that it's remarkable to me. It's remarkable. Sometimes I'm just at a loss of words.
To you all the time when I was young on Loveline. And it's so funny because I used to listen to Loveline all the time. And I'm in my 40s. And now the younger kids do not know who he is. They do not know the show Loveline. They don't know who this guy. And to me, it's just wow, we're old if we've hit the point where they don't know who Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla and Loveline.
Yeah, and also now I'm at this stage where I see people on social media at these red carpet events, big time, and I don't recognize the celebrity at all, and I'm just I'm really old now.
I don't know the young people at all, but I have to tell you, it was funny because you were telling Dr. Drew, you're like, oh, and he was saying, oh, it's full circle. Here you are. You used to listen to me. Now you're here. And then you said, oh, and we both were on Wheel of Fortune, but 20 years apart. I have to tell you, full circle. So this will come full circle. I actually co-hosted Loveline with Dr. Drew for a week.
What?
Back in my radio days. Yeah. Back when before I switched over into political, digital online political news, I used to do a syndicated radio talk show.
Yes.
And when I was, and it was about relationships. It was women's topics. It was Loveline, but for women and it was at night. It was, competed, but it got, was targeting a different audience. But when I was in between syndications, I had left the contract with one of the companies and before I moved on to iHeart, which ended up being iHeart, Loveline actually was trying to get me to potentially co-host with Dr. Drew. And they invited me in to test me out and sit there and do a week. But ultimately, I didn't want to. I'm a host. I'm not a co-host. It was just So I did launch a second syndication, but with iHeart before I left 3 years after that one, and became a political. Here I am. So full circle.
I love it. But I think what was missing on that show was a strong.
So she's saying there she's a political reporter or she's a political something or other. So she's just going to use that out, right? It's not her specialty. She's not a scientist. She's not even a science communicator. So, Tom Cowan, Jonathan Couey, they're all the same. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., it's all the same stuff to her. And so now we're going to have this lady on who's I guess, somebody who advocated for something, and it's just gross.
Strong, feminine, counter. There's a lot of masculine energy on that show, which is cool. That's how they want to do it. But that would have been awesome because you are that very strong feminine instead of that passive feminine.
But I have to tell you, the only celebrity crush I've ever had in my entire life is Dr. Drew. I don't know. And for whatever, there's a lot of good looking celebrity guys out there, but Dr. Drew, for whatever reason, and I had the hardest time sitting there in that room with him. I was like, this guy's so cute. And he is in person. He's so much more handsome.
Really?
Yeah. He's a good looking gentleman, and he's the only celebrity crush I've ever had.
I had a fangirl moment when I was oh my God, I'm talking to this guy. Yeah. And he died. I could totally see that. I actually probably have a little bit of a crush on him too.
And I'm sorry to all the male audience right now watching. Everybody's a man. Most of the audience is male, and they're like, "Oh, great! These girls are sitting here talking about some other guy." Sorry about that gag. I know. Okay.
Had a crush. Not present tense.
Right.
Maybe
past tense. No. Yes. Back then, this was when I was doing that, sitting in that, I was 30. I mean, I was over 10 years ago. So that I tried that out. Tried out Loveline. But I just thought that was funny as I was watching that. I was like, oh, full circle again, little, here. And I've been on that show. And so, okay, so let's talk. And he's also here in California, right? And
we still are somehow still.
I'm leaving though in 2 weeks. I'm out of here. But so let's talk about what the heck is going on. I've known that there's a lot.
Kim Iverson lives in California and Idaho. I think she has 2 different houses, which is pretty good.
A lot of censorship. Of course, we've been talking about this since the pandemic. The censorship against people like myself, the media was censored heavily, independent media.
I'm really getting tired of these people saying that they're censored, because if you have a Rumble contract where they're paying you to make a show, you're not censored. Censoring resulting in a career is not censoring. Censoring resulting in you getting on Tucker Carlson twice is not being censored. I don't know who thinks getting fired from a university but also getting a $500,000 settlement is the same thing as getting fired from a university. It's all these people from rich, ridiculously rich families that are actively working against my family. Why is Steve Kirsch and his $100 million of bullshit working against me? Why is a longtime DOD contractor like Robert Malone working against me? Why is somebody like, I don't know, well, who are these people? Kevin McKernan, a guy whose family has been taking contracts from the government and grants from the government to do cancer and has spun off companies from the Human Genome Project, spends his time attacking me from his house on the Atlantic Ocean. How is that even remotely possible? A woman whose daughter was on Alex Jones in 2019 who says she's retired after selling a company to Pfizer. I mean, who are these people? And now she's told to complain about censorship? Are you kidding me? Mark Kulak makes more videos than he gets views. Censorship my ass.
Yeah, where we would say something about, and I remember just reflecting back now in hindsight, saying early on that the COVID vaccine is doing, there's reports that it's having some effect on the heart. We don't know what the effect is, but it's doing something to the heart. That was totally ripped off online. They then slapped a sanction on my show. Basically, they said I got suspended for a week. I wasn't able to do any content. And then, fast forward a couple of months and they're like, oh yeah, it actually does cause myocarditis and pericarditis. And
so there we are right here. It's the hamster wheel, right? They introduced the myocarditis in the background with a bunch of meddlers, knowing all along eventually it was going to be acknowledged as one of the many things that was already expected. But it was expected because it was a transfection, not because of the spike protein going to the heart, like Richard Fleming said, or like Kevin McCairn was saying until he said it was going to the brain. Ladies and gentlemen, I am really upset because this is terrible.
Was intense against those of us in the media. We saw the Twitter files. We saw all of this. But what was going on with the doctors? What kind of censorship was happening on the physician side? Because all we saw was our doctors all following along like zombies. Like, get the shot. Everybody needs the shot. And you're like, okay, but no, get the shot. We can't even.
We're not talking about the 2 years of murder, right? You see this. 2020 and 2021 were murder. We're talking about the shot.
See you. You can't even step foot in our office. I mean, I had a legitimate heart concern. And the cardiologist saw me the first time. For the follow-up during the pandemic, would not see me without a vaccine. I mean, that.
Wow. Wow.
Patients were being censored from even seeing physicians, heart doctors. I wasn't able to get into a heart doctor. And it was because, well, if you're not going to get the vaccine, then we can't see you. You can't come into our office. So what was going on there? What the heck happened? And why is this still happening?
So, I think there's a couple of factors that were playing, at least a couple factors that were playing into it. One was in the beginning, a lot of doctors just didn't even know what was happening, and they're trying to get information from studies.
She's looking to the left an awful lot. I think she's got cue cards.
There's not a lot of studies. They're trying to get information from what's happening overseas. So the media is also affecting that, and they're trying to there's also like scrambling to see, like, can we see patients safely? Is it good for us? Is it going to be good for our kids if we go see a patient and then what's the latency period of this virus? So we were all scrambling to get information. And then because there was the reactivity.
the idea that they are interviewing somebody like a Hollywood actor and wannabe producer of movies about what happened during COVID when they were rolling out the vaccine early on Hollywood sets. Before anybody else got the vaccine, they were already on news sets with the newscasters and were already on Hollywood sets with the actors and all the people on set. How do I know? Because my friend Annie Wershing took a shot to be on the set of Picard, where she played the Borg Queen. And she died of brain cancer because she took this stupid shit to be on a frickin' set. And she's not even talking about that. She's part of that. I'm sure they'll talk about it in an hour. So the point is that these are not the people. Why do we want to talk to somebody who thinks it's that simple, who has no more insight than what she just said, and is going to have no more insight than this?
In the mainstream media was promoting certain narratives where you were seeing pictures of people dying in Italy, and there was mismanagement of systems in New York. So you were having people die at unnecessary rates, and people were just extrapolating that to mean that that was going to be their experience when COVID hit among their patients. It created a lot of like reactivity.
This is an audition. This is somebody who's auditioning to play a new role. This is gross. And it's very frustrating because this is the kind of thing that I call a hamster wheel. There's no freaking excuse for the censored Kim Iverson to even be tolerating this. Well, yeah. We already know this. Tell us something we don't know. But she actually started the interview with a question that she already knows the answer to. What was going on with the doctors? We know our doctors were, oh my gosh, this is just gross. Sorry, Kim, but it's terrible.
And so that was one. The news was interfering, the lack of information, the need for security. And
security.
What you ended up seeing, and what I started seeing very early on,
what she
was
started
even in my physician
seeing.
Facebook groups, there was a lot of like contentious discussion in a rate that I was.
Her physician Facebook groups, such a contentious discussion.
Worried. I was like, this is not calm-centered discussion. Even though you have this emergent thing, you need to have centered discussion.
What is this emergent thing that we have to have a centered discussion about? This is the biggest crock of bullshit I've ever heard. And this is what amounts to programming on the internet. She's making this clip for YouTube. But no clips of the former scientific advisor for the current Health and Human Services Secretary. No clips of the friend of Jay Bhattacharya. Just clips of this clown telling us what we all knew in 2020. Thanks a lot. Wow. So insightful from your script to your left.
And instead of like calling people names, there was.
Traitor.
Dr. David Weldon, it is such an honor to be here with you today.
When I went to Congress, I took a pay cut, okay?
You are the only one who can tell this story well, because you were there.
This music makes me want to hurt somebody.
1986 Act.
The American people need a CDC
it's
that
like
they can trust,
insulting.
and they don't have that right now.
I feel like I'm being patronized right now.
I always felt Wakefield was dealt with wrongly.
It's a complete distortion of free markets.
When it comes to vaccines, there's no duty to really investigate the safety.
Yeah.
Basically, Uncle Sam, the taxpayer, is going to pick up the tab if something goes wrong with this vaccine.
I'm Nicole Shanahan. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public.
Remember, this is the same lady that I just showed you a video of about a half an hour ago saying that she wanted all the data to fight chronic disease with AI. And now we're talking to Dave Weldon, who Polly Tommy said would be the CDC director in 2017 on the Vax bus with Brandy Vaughn. That, ladies and gentlemen, cannot be ignored. that he was nominated. I know that he didn't go to the Senate and get an interview or whatever, and he didn't get approved, but he was nominated, and Polly Tommy knew that he would be the nominee in 2017 on the Vaxxed bus. Tell me that this is not a plan to use a fake anti-vaccine movement to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as close to the White House as possible. That started all the way back in about 2015 or 2016.
Dr. David Weldon, it is such an honor to be here with you today. Your story is, I think, the modern American story. You spent time serving in our military. You're an internist. You spent 14 years in Congress. You are a model American.
14 years in Congress should be an automatic disqualifier for being a good guy. You can't be 14 years in Congress without having totally played the game. I don't think.
In every possible way. You're a devout Christian, and you're an active physician still at Health First Medical Group in Florida. And you are now famous. I did not know much about you until I actually read your exit letter and really spent time. I knew a bit about you when you were nominated by President Trump to serve as our next CDC director. And I have to say, Dr. Weldon, that 12 hours before your confirmation hearing, when I heard that you were no longer going to sit before the Senate committee and give your testimony on why you would make probably America's best head of the CDC, restore honor to that department, a department, an agency that 40% of Democrats and 80% of Republicans do not trust anymore. You are going to restore trust in it.
I'm glad you started with that, because that really was, one of my primary goals. And I thought the best way to achieve that was through transparency and high quality research.
High quality research and transparency. So we're going to do more studies. We were going to test the vaccines. Just like Steve Kirsch said on the Stu Peters podcast, that in 5 years, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will have given us a safe vaccine schedule. It is the same bullshit. They haven't moved an iota. It's the same song and dance bullshit. It's not a real anti-vax movement. You want a real anti-vax movement? The anti-vax movement that's real is right here at Gigaohm Biological, and I don't know if they're anywhere else.
And not calling people anti-vax, and not calling people names, but actually...
I'm not anti-vax, I'm sorry. We are the anti-intramuscular injection movement. Anti-intramuscular injection movement. That's what we are.
Actually listening to the public. Another amazing figure, the CDC is now recommending COVID shots for little children, and 90% of parents are refusing these shots. Now, are we going to say 90% of the American people have it wrong? At some point, you have to say, maybe the American people have it right and CDC has it wrong. And maybe a lot of people at pharma who are trying to promote all these vaccines have it wrong. So I wanted to try to get everybody together.
Sounds like it's pharma's fault.
And get everybody singing from the same sheet of music. I was very disturbed by the lack of confidence in CDC. The other analogy I like to point out, I'm still practicing medicine, part-time, but I still practice medicine. If you're a practicing physician and anything below 92% of your patients approve of you, like let's say you only have a 85% approval rating from your patients, you are considered a troubled physician. The average doctor is approved by their patients, 96%. Otherwise, the patients wouldn't be there in the office. And so, yeah, it's a real crisis.
What in the hell did that mean? What was he telling us that for? That approval ratings of doctors are going down on Google? What is that bullshit? Let's talk the truth. Let's talk transfection. Let's talk intramuscular injection. Let's talk about how the CDC has been lying about infectious disease and gaming the numbers for decades. No? Not going to do it? Okay.
Real problem. And I wanted to try to turn it around.
You were 12 hours from going before that first committee. And
can you believe that this was a vice presidential candidate, for shit's sake?
For this country to see and actually get to meet you. And you get a call from the White House saying that your nomination has been rescinded. And I mean, I can't imagine how that must have felt, Dr. Weldon.
Oh, it was, like being punched in the head. I mean, just for your viewers, okay, I got nominated November 22nd, and I began a preparation process.
I mean, he's about to get a fat job, so of course he began a preparation process, and of course he's disappointed he didn't get the super fat job. Just as happy as Jay Bhattacharya is to have gotten that super fat job.
And the 4 weeks leading up to that hearing that got canceled, I was basically staying in a hotel in Washington, D.C. and living out of a suitcase because they want you to meet with all the senators on the committee. And a lot of times they move the appointments around. And so you just have to be available. And so I was doing a lot of research, a lot of meetings for a very, very long time. And I thought I had a problem with the confirmation, basically coming from Senator Cassidy, maybe one or two of the other committee members, but to just get it, at the 11th, literally almost the 11th hour, it was 10 o'clock at night, and my hearing was 10 o'clock in the morning. And this poor staff guy at the White House was tasked with the responsibility of telling me, no, we're withdrawing your nomination. And of course, that's the news line that Trump withdrew my nomination. Well, Trump withdrew my nomination because there were people, specifically Senator Cassidy, who didn't want me. And he specifically didn't want me because, I wanted to do some more research on vaccine safety. And
he wanted to do some more research on vaccine safety. I don't know, maybe they would get around to testing some of the adjuvants, or I mean, I know that's on their list of things to test, the adjuvants. It might be the adjuvants.
The rest is history.
Well, Cassidy has a lot of people right now who want him to step down and find him a bit treasonous for interfering with what the American people want.
I think they're using that word on purpose because they're trying to take the teeth out of it. It's treason, really? Treason is when you lie about who you are and you lie about your motives of why you're running for president or why you're supporting a candidate or why you are objecting to the coronavirus narrative. And all of the people that I put on the screen, like Kevin McKernan and Jessica Rose and Meryl Nass and Robert Malone, are traitors in the worst kind of way, not in this flimsy, floofy, meaningless sort of way that this podcaster is using the word.
The American people need a CDC that they can trust, and they don't have that right now. And the reason they don't trust it is because of a plurality of reasons, which you so beautifully, and if, our listeners haven't read this yet, this is the official statement of Honorable Dave Weldon, MD, regarding recent withdrawal of nomination for CDC. And I read this and I couldn't help but get very emotional because you discuss how we got here And you give a few examples, really, really good examples. And these are lived examples. You know these characters in DC very well because you spent nearly 15 years working on the Hill. And what you describe is you describe a situation in which by far Big Pharma is the largest presence in DC lobbying. And you describe having relationships with some of these people that then turned on you. You know Dr. Bill Cassidy. He's also an internist. And you once considered him a friend.
I did. I actually went to a Christian couples retreat with him and his wife, and my wife got to spend time with his wife. Now, just because you're Christians doesn't mean you can't disagree on policy and issues, but it was a little surreal to find myself opposed by a colleague, essentially. Now, Rand Paul is also a physician, ophthalmologist, not an internist, but and he was foursquare trying to help me. There's another irony in all this that I didn't include in that letter. The CDC director was historically just hired by the secretary. So Bobby could have had me in there at the CDC 3 or 4 weeks ago. The two principal people who wanted to make the CDC nominee confirmable, okay, and that's called presidential appointed, Senate confirmed. It's a special category. Cabinet officials and key sub-cabinet officials were Tuberville from Alabama and Rand Paul himself, and they were both supporting me. They both wanted me in the position. And of course, we all know what happened. I was going to be the first one to face Senate confirmation, and it didn't go as planned, at least as Bobby Kennedy wanted.
And many millions of Americans wanted, including myself.
Oh, so many millions of Americans were hoping that Dave Weldon would be the CDC director. Even Polly Tommy has been hoping since 2017. I guess that makes her like a 10-year failure then, if she's been working to get Dave Weldon at the CDC and fix that problem with vaccine research. And now, darn it, that's too bad. That's a long road.
There's a story you tell in your letter about Dr. Andy Wakefield that I actually didn't have the full background of. And I had the pleasure of meeting.
I love that you guys found the enteromammary pathway. It's quite a revelation once you see the symbiosis for what it is.
I was told to ignore Wakefield, that his research was bad. And
Right.
So I did. I ignored it for a good number of years.
So she ignored Wakefield because people told her that Wakefield's research was bad. His performance was flawless. Their acting was flawless. Their theater was flawless. It moved 6 million votes. And then they took that theater over to the United States, tried to apply it to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I guess, and the Trump administration. It's just gross.
And in your letter, you describe his co-author, an Irish virologist, O'Leary, who he co-published.
It's funny that they want to talk about people that published with Andrew Wakefield, but they don't want to talk about Peter Daszak, who published with Andrew Wakefield. You know, that EcoHealth Alliance guy with the diffuse proposal that Charles Rixey risked everything to bring to light.
Stop lying!
One of Wakefield's 15 papers. So Wakefield published 15 papers and only one was withdrawn. It was that famous paper in the Lancet that he co-published with O'Leary. And you describe with great detail
the
PCR,
The PCR.
And the samples and how they showed strains.
Is she not the most compelling podcast host you've ever seen?
Of the virus in the vaccine strain measles virus in the biopsies, in the bowel biopsies of the children.
Yes.
And so you
it doesn't sound like she prepared very well for this, does it? And now they're going to go on to tell everybody how Andrew Wakefield is great and his data is great and he's just the best guy and he's of the highest ethical standards, yada, yada, yada. Or you think I'm full of it?
Self looked at the results.
Yes, that was, you know, it amazes me to this day. I actually sat down with O'Leary, and PCR, it stands for polymerase chain reaction. And he clearly showed that these were vaccine strain viral particles infecting the intestinal tract of these children. And it caused many parents to start refusing the measles vaccine, the MMR, in England. And then, of course, they started having measles outbreaks. And
retelling this story is actually the hamster wheel incarnate. There's no excuse for this story to be being told right now on this podcast in 2025. This is old bullshit history. It is old bullshit questions with bullshit answers. And they're telling it like it's history that nobody wants to talk about. Oh my goodness.
British health officials basically pressured O'Leary into withdrawing his statements.
I'm only going to let this go until you hear him say that Andrew Wakefield's the greatest guy.
You know, and then they went after Wakefield's license. So the tagline, and the media is always repeating it all over the place, that paper was withdrawn, Wakefield lost his license, portraying him as being this disreputable, unethical person. And it couldn't be further, the truth couldn't be further from that. I mean, it's breathtaking. Thank God for the internet, and thank God for podcasts like yours. And I have invitations to do more of these down the road, because more and more people are getting very, very well informed. And it's only going to undermine and cause more problems for CDC if they don't face this head on. What I wanted the CDC to do way back then, 20 years ago, was to just repeat Wakefield's study. Just do the bowel biopsies, send the specimens off, do the PCR, because that's the way science is supposed to work. Science is supposed to work when you publish a sort of a revolutionary, iconoclastic.
I don't think you need to see any more to know where this is going, right? This is pure narrative nonsense. And quite frankly, I think it is such a ridiculous admission to have a video from 2017 on the original Vaxxed bus interviewing Brandy Vaughan and having behind the camera one Polly Tommy from the UK who was on billboards in 2010 not trying to save anyone from making another autistic kid, not trying to save anyone from injuring another child, but advocating for better educational opportunities for the existing autistic kids in a bra on 90 billboards. Now, supposedly, that organization, Children's Health Defense, backing Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is at the forefront of this, and this interview is at the forefront of this. If you are not from America, I am pleading to you for help. America needs help. We are captured by an anti-vaccine movement that is fake and full of traitors. I think they're on the same team as Tony Fauci.
Get somebody to try to repeat it. And a lot of times, it can't.
How about this one? This one's extraordinary.
Is there any evidence that vaccines or the adjuvants for vaccines or anything about vaccines and their delivery can disrupt mitochondrial function. So often.
Think about how extraordinary it is that our new Biology 101 has something very, very, very unique and interesting to say about mitochondria. And it's not unique and interesting to say that mitochondria are endosymbionts, primary symbionts, remnants of bacteria that we've now adopted essentially as organelles. But what is very interesting to say is that the phages from our endosymbionts, the ones that are in our gut, are ectosymbionts. Those phages are free to pass through our body, which means that they're free to be selected for by our immune system, and they are free to communicate with maybe the mitochondria in every cell of our body. And it would make perfect sense. And it would be part of a magnificent symbiosis that would be an incredibly loud background of signaling. Not a sterile background that we can find individual coronaviruses on. Not a sterile background that we can find individual measles viruses on, but an infinitesimally dense background of phages and bacterial signals that are free to move through our body. If bacteria can move through your body, escorted by your immune system, and pass through the milk of lactating mothers, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very big problem on our hands because we do not understand our biology the way that the CDC and the NIAID and the NIAIH want us to believe it. We understand it. We don't understand anything then. And that means they've been lying to us for a very long time. And I think Joshua Lederberg knew they were going to do it. Mitochondria? Are you shitting me? Don't forget that the spike protein attacks mitochondria, and Walter Chestnut's been on the internet saying that for like literally 5 years. And Jessica Rose too. Jessica Rose has done a lot of that.
And we think that it's like the vaccine having a specific effect on what the vaccine was designed to target that could potentially cause side effects or something like that. That's what
I mean. Phages affecting our cells is also very possible. Of course, that's possible.
Many of the theories hold, but given the key role of mitochondria in all aspects of brain functioning, and given that
he's got a script that he's reading and he's trying to stay on brain functioning because he is hyper trained to stay in his lane. He's got to make sure that he couches all of his questions in his own expertise so that he doesn't feel like he's stepping on anybody's toes. And more importantly, he doesn't feel like he's taking any risks as a professional. This is how pathetic these brainwashed mental midgets are. I used to be one of them, so I know very well what I'm listening to. This Huber guy is one of the worst liars on the internet. He has taken advantage of everything that he could possibly take advantage of. His good looks, his testosterone treatments, his MMA buddies, his tough guys, his everything is done for his media enrichment and for his role in this ridiculous governance by personalities and by podcasts. He is awful. And if he's ever given out good ideas and ever given out good information, it was before he was co-opted during COVID. Now he's just a fake. And this podcast is just absurd. And if Mr. Huberman ever watches this and feels a little bit hurt by it, please feel free. I would have hours of discussion with you about how much of an idiot you are relative to a true biologist. You're masquerading as a biologist in your neuroscientist clothing. Like it's a joke.
People are convinced, I'm not saying I believe this, but are convinced that vaccines are tied to these mental health challenges or to autism. Let's be direct about this. Is there any evidence that vaccines can...
And remember, 2013, Brian would not allow him to use the word autism. He would just call it neurological damage from vaccination. It should be called neurological damage from intramuscular injection. Let's just be real. It is neurological damage from intramuscular injection. It's damage from intramuscular injection. It doesn't have to be neurological. It could be physiological. It could be metabolic. Gosh, I hate these fakes.
Of any kind can disrupt mitochondrial function or support mitochondrial function for that matter?
It is a contentious.
Maybe it's a different episode.
No. And I'm definitely going to answer it, but I'm going to give a long-winded answer if that's okay, because I want to give credible information.
Yeah, that's the only information we're interested in.
And I don't want to come down on one side that vaccines are 100% safe. There's no question about it. Or yes, vaccines cause autism, and that's why we've got skyrocketing rates of autism. Because I don't think either of those extreme positions is true.
And so he has no explanation at all then. So this is just, it's just the absolute most malevolent bullshit ever. And either these people are unwitting and therefore just really dumb, and that's probably the way it is with this guy. He just wants to say the right thing so that his rising star keeps rising, just like the jackass on the other microphone. They don't have thoughts of their own. They're not trying to evaluate the world and come up with their own ideas. They are trying very hard to play a political game. They're climbing a ladder of the elite. They are auditioning for greater roles in this show. They've just seen Robert F. Kennedy Jr. get all the way to HHS secretary. They've just seen Jayanta Bhattacharya get all the way to NIH. They know that if they do it right, there's big things for big people.
So I want to first back up and just ask a slightly different question. Is there any evidence that high levels of inflammation impair mitochondrial function?
Oh, high levels of inflammation. Now, here we go. And I'll just summarize it for you. Guess what they're going to say? We should use AI to fix chronic disease. They're going to say that it's not just vaccines, but it's vaccines given during a state of inflammation. Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? That's the same thing that Suzanne Humphries says repeatedly since 2018, and then on the Joe Rogan show. And yeah, it's really gross. Ladies and gentlemen, these are all liars. They're put in place wittingly or unwittingly to cover people like Brandy and cover biology like mine. And it's not my biology, but I'm the only one teaching it. And it's not my politics, but I seem to be the only one besides Mark Kulak who's able to point out why it would be that these particular clowns would jump out of the car in 2020. Why these particular clowns were put in place. Why these particular clowns contacted me. Why these particular clowns paid me. And why now no one will talk to me. The only way to understand it is, I think that intramuscular injection is dumb. I think the way to teach your children to think about pharmaceuticals is that there's a huge difference between injection and ingestion. And I think you should teach people that this was always transfection, and transfecting healthy people is nuts. And I think since 2013, Brian Hooker's been more than equipped to say those words. And he's chosen not to. Probably because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Mary Holland and Meryl Nass convinced him that eventually they would do it together. Ladies and gentlemen, PCR as a diagnostic is a fraud. I gotta really say, I think, where's my beater head? Yep, right there. That goes there. Synthetic recombinant genetics is all they really got. What that means is that they can make large quantities of DNA, and large quantities of DNA are exactly how they transfect things. It's exactly how they make synthetic biologics at all pharmaceutical companies, and therefore all these people that descend from pharma already knew a long time ago that making the mRNA using bacterial cultures was going to result in an impure mRNA and also a contaminated RNA. And so acting surprised about it is ridiculous. And in fact, ladies and gentlemen, saying that they found SV40 is also ridiculous. Why? Because at every university, in every place in the Western world, in every pharmaceutical company that's making a biologic, they are probably using the sequence of SV40 to drive the expression of plasmids in bacteria. That means everywhere that this process is happening, there's potentially an SV40 gene sequence being produced in high pure quantities and being carried home on shoes, being inhaled, being aerosolized, being a background signal, and maybe integrating, who knows, maybe being in somebody's gut, who knows. But to say that every SV40 signal in the world is based on Pfizer's vaccine is so stupid and such a lie that only someone like the research and development director of the Human Genome Project could go on stage repeatedly and tell that lie. Ladies and gentlemen, all they would need to do is release a small, synthetic, pure quantity of the sequence they wanted to find anywhere they wanted to find it, and it would be very findable by PCR and sequencing reactions with primers aimed at it, especially if you had an agent in Wuhan paid to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, transfection was always a crime. The way they got away with it is most of them were placebo. That's probably the way they get away with the vaccine schedule and in general. Merck gets away with the vaccine schedule in general. Ladies and gentlemen, teach your kids that endemicity is a lie. It's a mythology. It's a basis for all of this shit. Things cannot go from being a molecule in a mud puddle to endemicity. That is nonsense. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a background signal that was exaggerated with non-specific PCR tests. RNA cannot pandemic. Intramuscular injection is dumb. Transfecting healthy people was always a crime, and the population pyramid is a problem that needed solving. Thanks very much for being here. I hope you have a good evening. I don't think I'm going to do a show on Sunday, but I will be here again for a whole week, Tuesday through Friday. Same schedule as last week. I have to look it up what the exact schedule was again. Let me see. Over here, I'm going to go to gigaohm.home. I'm going to grab this and put it over here. I'm going to make it big. And then I'm going to scroll down and I see Tuesdays, Taco Tuesday, so it could be anything. You just have to show up and see what I'm serving. And then Wednesday will be the Journal Club for Biology 101. I'll post those papers up via email soon. And then we'll have a lecture on Biology 101 on Thursday. And then Friday we'll have another one of these shows. They got postponed because I got a little thrown off this week. I'm going to start shooting on the basketball court now. I got really far ahead. I'm finally in shape. Today I can finally hang on the rim comfortably with just one step. It's taken me about 2 months to get there. I'm very, very proud of myself. I've actually been on the gym floor, jumping rope, 91 days out of the last 96 days. And I'm doing it all for Gigaohm Biological on the hardwood. So I don't know if it's going to be worth it or not, but I'm certainly in better shape than I was. I'm spending a lot of time with my kids, and it's all because I've got a few supporters out there. Thank you very much. Thank you.